Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
We're going streaking!
Dave's Video Graveyard.
That guy in a little coat. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
I'm not a smart man.
Shut up!
One tubby.
What's wrong with him?
My first thought would be alive.
Why so serious?
Wise man say forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza.
Hail to the king, baby.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf! We want it now! The meatloaf!
Of all the radio shows in the world, this is definitely one of them. Dave's Video Graveyard on 100.5 WOW FM.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn...
It is 100.5 WOW FM, Dave's Video Graveyard for your Monday night. An absolute pleasure to be with you. Joining me as always, my good friend Paulie. How you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Actually, I shouldn't say good friend because you did spend the evening telling me what you thought of the film The Big Hit, and now I don't know if we can consider each other friends.
You're the one that made me watch it. I don't think I can consider you a good friend.
So you're upset with me also. It is time once again for another of our signature guest choice specials, and this evening our guest has lowered their, I guess you'd say, standard for the evening. We are joined by court reporter / true crime analyst, the voice of Wrestle Rampage, as well as
Wrestle
a toy
Rampage?
collector.
Right City.
Right City, sorry. Oh, wow, we're off to a great start. Oh, now we have heat. Award-winning author Sean Fewster. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing well, but I've got to ask, what's the debate on The Big Hit? Do we like? Do we not like?
Some of us love it. Some of us don't have any taste.
Paul, no, you don't go for the crunch, man? The crunch?
Sidebar, do you know where I can buy one of those? It's for a friend. Ask for a
No,
friend.
I do not. And don't ask me
Can I
after the
borrow
show.
yours?
Don't
Can I
ask me
borrow
after the
yours?
show.
Some of us was very okay not seeing Lou Diamond Phillips in his prime.
No, seriously, look, guys, thank you for having me on. Dave, this is not lowering at all. It's awesome to be here.
Oh, so you're always low quality. Is
Exactly. Absolutely.
Fantastic. You live such a multifaceted life. It's quite extraordinary. I'm going to spend the evening trying to make you talk about wrestling and toys, and Paul will surely be pulling you in the true crime direction.
So it's a Monday then.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Tell us about yourself. Where do you start when you tell about yourself?
Born in a rural cheese log cabin. No. No, grew up in Gawler. Dad was a cop. Mum was a teacher. And one of my uncles was a bikie, so that always made for interesting family get-togethers.
Yeah, that's
both
good.
sides of the law.
Yeah.
But that sort of coloured my view on a lot of things. You know, you saw both sides. Like I like to say, every time you saw someone arrested, you didn't just see justice, you saw friends and family left behind, wife without a husband, kids without a father. So you got an idea very quickly of the differences between law and justice and how those things tended to affect lots of people. Growing up in the part of Gawler that I did also meant you're exposed to a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life, and that got my interest in knowing about people, knowing about their stories, but also in heroism and social justice and, you know, characters like Batman and Spider-Man and all those sorts of things, because I just wanted to do something nice for people around me.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that would really form your view of, like, and also...
Right, comics. I need to find something to do, but until then, still waiting, Marvel. So I sort of focused on journalism because, again, you know, I saw what the old man did, had no interest in going into the police force, saw what the uncle did, certainly had no interest in following that path, but I thought right down the middle, that's where I want to go.
And you became Dexter.
I did. No. Shh, we're not going to talk about that. No, so I went right down the middle, and so from about the age of 10, I always wanted to be the court reporter for the Tizer, and that's where I am now.
Yep.
Wow. It's so... you never see those dreams come through from the age of 10, which, like, that's just as amazing that that you got there. Yeah.
Well, look, I've been very fortunate. I look, like you say, multifaceted, the things that I've gotten an opportunity to do. I look back at my young self and think he'd just be dying to see it all come to pass.
Yeah. Also, you've gone on to write an amazing true crime book that has been adapted into a television show. How does that feel? Do you set yourself is it basically very selfish when you, for a lack of a better term, is it very selfish as in you go, I'm going to write a book. I can do this. I'm going to write a book for me. You write it, and at that point you're like, oh, I'm going to get this published. Then you tick off that, and you're like, oh, this could be made into a television show. How does that happen?
I wish it was like that, but really it
And
isn't.
is there a market for colouring in books?
Definitely a market for colouring in books. Oh, look, adult colouring in books, they're all the rage. Look, it's funny because I never set out to do any of the things that I did do. I set out to become chief court reporter for the Tiser, and I did that. And I just really wanted to be paid to write. Then when I got into court reporting, it was I want to tell the stories of the people that have been affected. I want to give the voiceless a voice. I want to make sure that all those people that don't get a chance to speak out in court, to talk about what they go through, have a platform where those stories can be told. That became my driving force, my purpose, if you will, to do that. Along the way, I never thought about writing a book in a true crime sense. You know, everyone wants to write the next great novel or something like that, but I never thought, oh, I'll write a true crime book. Then Hachette came knocking on my door and said, we'd like you to write a book. I said, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. I'm actually going through a divorce. Come back later. And they came back later and they said, we'd like you to write a book. Still, I'm like, oh, I can't help you. I'm actually flying overseas to meet a new person. Right, okay, they came back later. We'd like you to write a book. Sorry, I'm actually getting married to that person. When they finally rolled around, I think it was the fourth time, I said yes. And they gave me a pretty lucrative contract and said, oh, we had to give you this good money because you were playing so hard to get. No, actually I wasn't.
Just life.
It just was life. And there's been, like I say, I'm very fortunate, I'm very blessed because there's been a lot of those things. When you write a book, obviously, they do up the contracts for if this turns into a TV show, something like that. You know, here's the contract, just in case sitting in the drawer. Well, we had Eddie Maguire's production company knock on the door and say, we're interested. And then they're like, oh, well, we've managed to get Anthony LaPaglia interested. Now, All-Star Superman is a fantastic Superman animated movie. Anthony LaPaglia plays Lex Luthor, so I'm like, I'm going to have Lex Luthor reading my words on air. That's pretty cool. So it has been a series of very fortunate accidents, and couldn't be happier.
Awesome. What about the toy collecting side of your life? That's very important when it comes to character building and being awesome. Paul knows nothing about that.
But that toy collecting side of my life is to say, really, there's the toy collecting life and then there's the other sides of my life. You know, they sort of go around it. That's the main trunk, if you will. I've always been a big toy buyer ever since I was a kid. Had a lot of health issues as a kid, had a lot of allergies and things like that. Food allergies in particular, so parents couldn't, buy you a treat at the end of the grocery shopping to make sure you were good. It was more like, be good for the next month and you can have Optimus Prime.
Nice.
And that sort of tied into my moral development as well, because the food allergies I had tended to affect the psychosis, tended to make me go a bit mental, break things over people, attack people, be very horrible. So it was like, right, I want to be less like Megatron, more like Optimus Prime. And then,
so you turned grey and you died.
That's right, yes. Yes, very much so. That's why the hair's gone. But, the toy collecting became a big thing. A good friend of mine says they're not just toys, they're totems. They represent something or an ideal that's very important to us. And my collection's very much like that. It's fun little moments, or it's stories with friends, or it's a relative gave me this, or I remember this incident, or more with Transformers in particular, this storyline, this event, these characters mean something to me.
Now, all these amazing facets of your life are obviously put to the wayside for the most important part of your life, beyond family. It is wrestling.
Absolutely.
What is professional wrestling to you?
Professional wrestling to me is freedom. It's a place to go and give back to an art form that I've enjoyed my entire life, and to help develop local talent, to help them get on a bigger stage, to see more of the country, work with Riot City to, get the next generation over, to continue the legacy of the Bassos and the Grecos and that amazing house that they've built there, to also work with Adrian and World Series Wrestling to get Australian wrestling on the global stage and get some of the biggest names in the world to Australia. I love the pageantry, I love the pomp and circumstance, I love the storylines, the depth, the ridiculousness, the drama, the hijinks, everything. It's one of the absolute best entertainment forms, and it's improv. 3 hours of improv. How can you beat that? Just everyone's going to react to the audience. Things are going to happen. Things are going to change. You've got to roll with it. It's phenomenal.
Summed up perfectly in Max Landis's Wrestling Isn't Wrestling, I think.
Oh, look, I don't like Max Landis anymore, but he's definitely nailed that right. You can't argue with that. It's just... it's never wrestling. And one of the things I like about my gig with Riot City and with World Series is that I get to do the Mean Gene thing. I get to be like Kermit in the Muppet Show, be the ringmaster while everything else is going insane around me. I love that role.
And not taking bumps wouldn't hurt either.
And not taking bumps is wonderful. I am made of tissue paper and I am made of pipe cleaners, and I would blow away before I would take a bump.
And I think you're in the local professional wrestling at a really exciting time, being that you've seen it from its infancy to grow up, and particularly on a world stage now. It's the indie guys that are they're the future of of all the companies, because obviously the big game being that was the WWE, the product has gone down and down over the years, and it's almost losing its relevancy to a degree, not taking anything away from the amazing athletes in the WWE, but it's the like of AEW and all the indie guys that are getting fans excited about the product again. So
when you've got someone like Joey Ryan who can make a 7-figure salary without going near any of the major companies, without going near Ring of Honor, without going near Impact, without going near AEW, and definitely not going near WWE, that shows you that independent wrestling is where it is. Someone like Kenny Omega talking about the absolute artistic and creative freedom you can have, and then taking all of that and turning it into something like Double or Nothing that was just on, which was still a coherent show that followed the proper beats, that got people involved, that drew them in, that let them down, that lifted them up, that moved them around. You don't need to follow the cookie-cutter machine product of the WWE. Now, I've lived inside the WWE. I've been there, I've worked there, I've done stuff there, and I've worked with the independents. The independents is where I would rather be as well. Not that WWE is going to knock on my door anytime soon, but I just enjoy that freedom to express different stories, tell different things, and to see people like Robbie Eagles, rise up the ranks, to see Gino Gambino, on the stage in Japan and things like that. That's the goal, to see that sort of thing happen.
No, it really is an exciting time. Obviously, this evening we're talking about your 10 favourite movies of all time. Every time we have a guest on for the Guest Choice Special, they tell us how hard it was. I'm guessing it was similar for you.
I got to 7, and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do for the last 3. And then I was at 13. How did that happen? So eventually I got there. I've cheated a couple of times, I think you've noticed, so we'll see how we go. But I'm pretty sure that we hit the numerical 10, and I'm fairly satisfied with the choices. A couple of runners-up that didn't quite make the list. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a runner-up, very close. Batman Returns, very, very close runner-up. But these 10, I think, sum it up.
Nice.
I want to do a Roger Rabbit one.
Now, I don't want to take things down too far, but I do definitely want to mention this evening that sadly the local wrestling scene, in fact the Australian wrestling scene, lost a very, very important figure. Sadly didn't realise how important he was in the basically bigger picture, but going to play a song for a good friend of a lot of the local wrestling scene and the Australian wrestling scene. Josh Armour passed away recently, and basically want to let everyone know if they're having a hard time, contact the likes of Beyond Blue. The number is 1300 224 636, or contact Lifeline. There's always someone there to help. This song is quite funny to myself and Josh because he always let me know what a massive fan of Prince he was, and he always says how much it upset the amount of people that didn't know much of Prince. And I said, I know Prince, and I listed 3 songs, which really upset and triggered him because I said, I know When Doves Cry, I know
I can hear him now. I can hear him.
And he told me that if I didn't listen to this song, then I couldn't ever talk about Prince again. So I thought, what a better song than to play for him. So this one goes out to Josh. This is DVG. It is Dave's Video Graveyard here on 100.5 WOWFM. There we heard from Queens of the Stone Age. It is another Guest Choice Special. We are joined by Sean Fewster, taking us through his 10 favourite films. Now, the first one, I read your list when it was sent, and I was like, I don't know this film. So I looked into it, and it said starring Russell Crowe. I'm like, oh, okay.
Otherwise known as Big Brody Marshall.
Yeah, it was that mid-2000s Big Toady Marshall, as he's known here on our show. And then the next name I read was Ben Affleck, Russell Crowe. I was like, oh, this really sounds pretentious. Fantastic film. Why don't you tell us what it is?
So State of Play originally started off as a 6-part British drama, all about the political corruption and a journalist's attempt to expose it. Yep. Then it was taken across to the US by the same creative team and turned into a 2-hour movie, which is no mean feat, taking 6 episodes of television and doing that. But it's a really fascinating story about political corruption in Washington, dating back to military operations and how you see senators come up from the military ranks and move into the political ranks, and a very old school, flea-bitten, hard journalist trying to use his old school tactics in a very modern world as the newspaper he works for is crumbling around him. As the advent of the internet, as the lack of advertising affects not only him, but his co-workers, and most importantly his editor, who is a phenomenal performance by Helen Mirren, just absolutely killing it.
So why does this speak to you, Sam?
It sounds like he's begging to have his offices raided. Not topical at all.
Well, I loved it because when I first saw it, I was on a plane. I was on a plane to the US, and I'm flicking through trying to find something to watch, and this came on, and I was captivated by how realistically it portrays journalism. Not just in terms of what we were going through in 2009 as an industry and what we're going through to more or less extent today, but the actual art of making the phone calls, chasing people down, asking the questions, staying within the ethical lines, worrying about when you've stepped over them, how you work with your colleagues versus how you compete with your colleagues, how you communicate with an editor, trying to get them to leave you on a story or give you that little bit more time. Things like, you hear the old cliche of stop the presses, I've got a story. That never happened. But then this film shows what actually does happen when you've got something that breaks really late and how everybody just throws in together.
Can I ask you a question? So you've lived through the going into the internet age of journalism. How do you go, what was the transition like of having less internet, the news at your fingertips all the time, to people were really relying on that paper, and then we used to have two papers, we used to have the news that came in in the evening sort of thing. What was that like, that transition of and how have you dealt with that as a journalist? So for the journalist, I think it's actually a better system because, especially for the print journalist, it used to be that, let's say I went to a court case during the day. Court case finishes at 11:30, 12 o'clock. I might have a story written in my head, I know what it's going to be, but I've got to wait until the TV news goes out that night because whatever angle that I've picked could turn up on all the news services that night. So I've then got to wait and rewrite it and do something different so that we're offering our readers something else. The number of times you'd have a great idea and then you hear ABC Radio say exactly your line, be like, damn it, I have to think of something new. The flip around to digital means that we're breaking the news. Right, okay. Not only via Twitter, but we're beating the radio, we're getting it up online before anybody else. We are the first port of call for all the news in Adelaide. And I love that because it means we set the news agenda. We can, 10:30, 11 o'clock, we report the court case as it finishes. Then the rest of the day is for analysis or reaching out to victims or reaching out to people involved, taking the story further, talking about the issues involved. So for the journo, it's brilliant. Yeah. Monetizing that has been very difficult because people aren't willing to pay for news. And it's about teaching the consumer that, hey, there is really good stuff here and it is actually worth your time and it is worth your subscription. And that's the battle we're facing. And State of Play really talked about the very early stages of that because you've got the Rachel McAdams character who is trying to get gossip over the internet and trying to get people to read that sort of thing, with the old school reporter Russell Crowe saying there's nothing in this internet stuff. But it's the two of them together that actually break the story. It's the two of them that actually crack the mystery at the heart of this film, and it shows how the two sides work together. You've got to have that old school attitude and that new school approach to the medium. Do you see that in a lot of the new journalists coming through, or do you reckon it's more just the gossip sort of thing? Or it's not more the gossip. There's a lot of passion. There's just not a lot of experience. Okay. And one of the things that really needs to come through in the teaching of journalism at universities is sticking to the fundamentals. One thing that I've noticed is people don't want fancy news. They don't want to scroll through a website and have clickbait. They don't want clickbait, but they also don't want news where a window suddenly opens and plays a video or a screen gets bigger and smaller. They want the same news they've always had in the format that they want to read it. They want to be able to scroll through it on their phone. They're not looking for bells and whistles. They're not looking for special abilities. They're not looking for value added. They want content, honest content, delivered in a brand new way. And that's why I think court reporting in particular has benefited so much from digital journalism. It's what you want, when you want it, how you want it, and then the analysis comes later. Now, you mentioned ethics a little earlier. How do you go with, obviously you have your own set of ethics plus what seems to be considered generally the right thing to do. Do you ever find competing journalists
pushing harder than you would push, and say they scoop something, does that make you think maybe I should push harder, or are you
Never.
happy? You're happy that
Never.
Yep.
No, look, I've
Say you go to a house where something's happened, and someone from a rival thing is like climbing the fence around the corner,
Which
and
has
you're
happened.
and you're like, I would never do that.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't move your resolve at all.
doesn't move my resolve at all, because at the end of the day, what are we here to do? We're here to inform, we're here to educate, and we're here to give a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah.
Now, the voiceless is that person who's sitting in that house having some nutcase from another station climb over the fence to get an exclusive interview. That helps nobody.
Yeah.
Their time to talk is when they're ready to talk.
Yeah.
It's not about meeting my deadline. It's not about getting something that nobody else has got. It's about telling the story in the best possible way. And again, to keep circling back to this film, that's the sort of thing that the Russell Crowe character does in this, and it's some of the arguments that he has with the Rachel McAdams character about this is where the line is. And his ethical stance gets him in a lot of trouble in this film. His editor nearly fires him, they nearly lose the case, all sorts of things go wrong. But the film proves that standing to your ethical line as a journalist gets the correct result. It may take longer, but it's the proper way.
Now,
Are you attracted to a lot of those journalism movies? Like, is this the only one that you think really gets it right, or there's a few more? Or?
I know a lot of people swear up and down by Searchlight,
Spotlight. I was going to say that as well.
Yeah, and I get why they like it, because that tends to portray.
It is montagey though, because
it's montagey, but it's also journalist as superhero.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love my superheroes, but I don't want journalist as superhero films unless it's Superman or Spider-Man. You know, that's their job. Stuff where it's like, and journalism conquers all, hooray. Not really the case. All the President's Men.
Yeah.
The difference between the book and the film version of that is huge, because you've got Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, who in 70s America have to be portrayed as counterculture heroes.
Yeah.
So it changes the narrative of that story. State of Play, everybody in that film's got feet of clay. They're human beings. They're real. Even though they're completely fictional characters, they are realistic people. And that, for me, makes for a better story.
Which love or hate him, like Russell Crowe plays that character well. Like he plays like the everyman quite well.
Oh,
it's when when he tries to do other stuff, and it's like just settle down.
His character in this Cal, I've known 1,000 Cals over the years, and I've been Cal myself many times. I've also been Rachel McAdams' character as well. You know, that's who we are as journalists, and I love that he's a sort of an amalgamation of all these different types of people to tell a truthful story about journalism.
It's quite funny, like, looking into this film when I saw it on your list, I'm like, it's so transparent what you liked about it, and I was like, it would be so hilarious if we got here and we're like, excuse me, what do you like about this film? You're like, Helen Mirren's really hot in this.
Well, let's not mince words. Helen Mirren is really hot. Let's never get away from that fact.
Yes. I was just wondering if we're on the same page.
Oh, yeah. Helen Mirren is absolutely incredibly gorgeous and a phenomenal actor in this and many other things. Red as well. She's great in Red. You know?
Everything. Moving on to your next choice, got to move along. 1993, it is the children's film that was considered too much for a children's film. It is The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Love this film so much. Look, I'm not going to get into the usual stuff that we would talk about with Nightmare Before Christmas. I'm pretty sure anybody that listens to this show knows, loves, and worships at the altar of Nightmare Before Christmas. At least you'd hope so. You know, video graveyard. You'd think so. For me, what I love about this film is that I identify very much with Jack Skellington. Okay. Jack, as the main character, is the master of Halloween, the master of what he does. He's so good at it. Everybody thinks he's amazing at it, and he just wants to do something different.
Yeah.
For a lot of years, that was me.
Yeah.
I'd gotten known for court reporting. I'd gotten known for true crime. And I loved the film before this, but this is when it's really started speaking to me on a deeper level. You know, I was pigeonholed. I wanted to bust out. I wanted to try something new. I was fortunate. Wrestling came along, being able to bring geek culture into the paper a little bit, doing some of the other bits and pieces that I do. But I really identified with Jack's struggle there as the artist who just wants to try something new. I also love the fact that he took it too far. He went too far. He sacrificed his artistic integrity and went completely Disney. I'm just going to do Christmas, and ruined it completely, because that's not where you're welcome. And I totally get what Tim Burton was saying there when he wrote the original the original poem on which that's based. And I just love what it says about the artist perception of themselves and others' perception of the artist.
I'd also love to hear your opinion on latter-day Burton.
Ooh, now that's a thing, isn't it? Because Burton's catalogue ever since is very, very uneven.
Yeah.
Ridiculously uneven. You look at something like Miss Peregrine's and you can see shades of moments of, it's almost there again.
I likened that film to, say there's a glass. Someone drank a tall glass of Tim Burton film.
Yep.
Then someone else filled that empty glass with water. And that's what the film was.
Yeah,
because it was like
give you
the
that.
flavour's almost there, but it's not that first glass.
It's not quite. And I mean, the Alice films, again, you can see what he's trying to do. Some of it lands, some of it doesn't. I think Looking Glass was probably better because he could just go where he wanted with it.
I don't know if you saw Dumbo, but that actually felt like a Tim Burton film made by a Tim Burton that's ashamed of his own style.
Really?
Because it was so hidden and watered down. It was...
But if you can get into bed with Disney, like and then they can say like, oh, we're edgy because it's a Burton film, it's going to be kooky, but it's still going to be Disney.
But in saying that, with the new Dumbo, it commits no sins that Spielberg's BFG didn't commit. You know what I mean? It's still cookie cutter in a lot of ways. It's just with a competent director that's known for a certain thing behind it, and they didn't deliver that certain thing, which goes into the thing we're always talking about, we call it the Last Jedi effect, where fans are now at an age where we've got too much of an opinion. And it, like with Sonic the Hedgehog, which is scary precedent that we actually get a bit of say in what's happening, which shouldn't happen, I don't think.
For my opinion, Burton really started struggling around the time of Mars Attacks. I think Mars Attacks was an exercise in largesse. It's one of only 2 films I've ever walked out of.
Really?
Yeah, when Jack Nicholson died for the second time, spoiler alert, when Jack Nicholson died for a second time in Mars Attacks, I went, I'm done. I'm sorry, Tim. You've vanished up your own rear end. This is just about you doing exactly what you want to do, and you really need a competent editor to come in here and rein you in a little bit.
And he's got the reputation that he now has. Sadly, not many people saw Frankenweenie, and that is 100% a return to form.
That was a fantastic film.
It
absolutely
is
both
everything.
versions.
It was everything you'd love from a Burton film, but no one saw it.
No,
I always give props to the musical he did to the
Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. I mean, I like the musical. I've always liked that musical because it's just so gory and awesome. But yeah, like I didn't hate that. And I didn't like a lot of Burton films, but yeah, I've always held a candle for that one. So
Sleepy Hollow was good too.
That's a weird. Have you watched that recently?
No, not recently.
Rewatch it again.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Time has not been kind.
It's an odd film. I'm not really sure. There's a weird story. There's a story there somewhere.
It's no big hit. Let's put it that way. We might get back into the music as we continue through your choices here on DVG. It is Dave's Video Graveyard, 100.5 WOWFM. There we heard the Happy Hippie Coalition with Androgynous by your mates.
My mates?
The Replacements.
Ah, awesome.
It is DVG. We are talking with Sean Fewster about his 10 favourite films of all time, and he has picked a film with the Lord and Saviour himself, one Mr. K. Russ, across myself. Tell us the film you've picked.
It just looks like you're tweaking your nipples.
Crossing my nipples.
The 1993 Western classic, Tombstone.
La-di-da. One of the greatest Westerns ever.
Oh, absolutely. Look, this is a film that speaks right to the core of me. Like I said earlier, grew up in Gawler and grew up near my grandparents' farm. All of my mum's side of the family were massive cowboy fans, Gunsmoke and Annie Oakley and things like that. So there were always old-style cap guns and bits and pieces of cowboy paraphernalia everywhere. So I got into Westerns very young. Zorro, Lone Ranger, all those sorts of things. And I loved the story of the OK Corral.
Okay.
And I really got into it, and I really started obsessing over it, finding as much as I could. I reckon one of the first times I ever got taken into the city to the state library, I went looking for books on Tombstone and the OK Corral. So, one of those things, how kids get a weird obsession, and that's just what they do. That was one of mine. And then every film they ever made about Wyatt Earp was crud. It would finish with the OK Corral, and I'm like, that's not the story. That's where the story kicks off. Or they would change this or change that, or he would be impossibly heroic or whatever. Then Tombstone comes out, and that film's attention to detail, and we were talking about this before we went on air. Dave, you tell the story better than I do. The fact that the film almost fell apart in the making.
Yeah, pretty much. The directors were getting, and the studio were pulling in all these different directions. Big part of it going towards all the eggs were in the Kevin Costner basket at that point of the 90s, and he was known to be making the film Wide Earp, which was facing its own production value hell, but this movie more so in the fact they lost the director, and then because of certain laws and stuff, they couldn't replace directors because, the way it runs off percentages, the director had already done a certain percent where it couldn't be... it couldn't be recredited because they'd already recredited it once. So I believe 1/3 of the film was shot. Another director shot the second third of the film, and at which point it fell apart again. And by all unconfirmed reports, Kurt Russell had to direct and wrangle, pretty much do every job on set to get this film finished.
Craft services.
Jack Burton's sausage sizzle. But no, just the end result is what I consider perhaps Val Kilmer, one of his greatest roles. And
how does it rate against Emilio Estevez? Because that's my Western.
Young Guns is absolutely brilliant, but Tombstone is on a level above because they forensically recreated the events of the OK Corral shootout.
Yeah.
Like, literally everyone is standing where the real people were standing. The trajectory of the bullets and the shots, the order in which the shots are fired is correct based on all the eyewitness accounts of the time.
And two things that stand out in this movie that will make you 100% believe that. There is the shootout with Curly in the riverbed.
Yep.
And there is a shootout at the OK Corral, and it is Stormtrooper City when it comes to aiming. There is bullets flying everywhere for, I reckon there was maybe 12 shots for every kill.
Yep, absolutely.
Windows blowing out, squibs going off everywhere.
Because nobody's made to look heroic, like a Deadeye shot or none of those Western tropes. This is men with bits of lead, with guns that don't always work, firing at each other in an absolute panic.
Yeah.
Suddenly realising they have to fight for their lives. And it's gritty realism without being the capital G gritty, capital R realism, that Christopher Nolan over the top, this is real now, folks. It's this is the panic. This is the pants-wetting panic of being in a gunfight. And to top it all off, you've got one of the best cinematic friendships ever in the form of Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp and, as you were saying, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. That is a truly memorable pairing, and the way those two back each other to the hilt and then fall out and then back each other to the hilt again is the sort of friendship everybody wants to walk home with one day.
And in case you're not on board with hating Powers Booth in this,
he will make you hate him.
At first, he takes the use of Sam Elliott's arm, spoiler alert, but then he takes Bill Paxton completely out of the movie, which is a sin.
Game over, man. Game over.
And you're 100% on Wyatt Earp's side. I also did like the characterization of Wyatt Earp. He comes to town, and every cliched, gunslinger movie where it's like, we need you to be the hero. And it's like, yep. This movie sets quite clearly that Wyatt Earp's like, no, I'm here to exploit the gambling trade, and then
I'm here to make money off suckers, folks.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to do. I'm retired. He's a rascal. He's a rapscallion. And to borrow a Star Wars, usually Wyatt Earp's portrayed as Luke Skywalker. He was Han Solo.
Yeah.
That's who he was. It's just that Doc was even more of a rapscallion and even more of a rogue above beyond all.
I think I quite often say the characterization of Han Solo laid the groundwork for every film hero for a very long time. And sometimes it takes away from the movies because they decide to have more than one Han Solo in it.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell's characters are both a variation of Han Solo. And the likes of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
And so many Marvel films took from that. They're like, right, we need the wisecracker that can back it up with the action. And, oh man, it's a perfect film.
It really is. I mean, I showed it to my kid not long ago, and, this is a teenage attention span. Glued the entire time. It's not a short film. Glued the entire time. Full of questions afterwards because it's just compelling.
My wife watched this film and watched all of it, which that is the biggest endorsement I could give for a Western ever, because I think the only other Western she sat through is Blazing Saddles. Also
is
factually
amazing.
Correct, amazing film. Now, you have picked perhaps the top 3 films chosen in the 2-year run of this show. You have picked one of the films that it's probably a toss-up between this, Empire Strikes Back, and Goodfellas to be the number 1 spot. But why don't you tell us your next choice from 1989?
Well, I was struggling here, and I almost cheated completely and picked 3 films for this slot. I was good. I've decided, no, I'm not going to give Dave and Paul the opportunity to tell me I can't do it. I'm just going to cut it down. So if I had to pick from the second of the two holy trilogies, I was going to pick Back to the Future Part 2.
Lovely.
Nice. The darkest one.
Yes, the darkest time.
The one that used to scare me as a child.
Really?
Yeah, there's a bit when there's like the gang in the back of the truck and they're driving around. That scene for some reason just really used to freak me out, and I didn't like. I was watching it one night with my sister and my parents went there, and triggered.
It's so amazing how things like that stick in your head. Apparently, I was like that with the Tauntaun in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, right.
Just the noise of the Tauntaun as a kid would send me scrambling out of the room. And for years, apparently, I didn't watch Empire because I couldn't get past that very first Tauntaun call.
Yeah.
The end of Masters of the Universe, the film, where Skeletor comes out of the water, was so horrifying for me that I used to watch it at Nan's house, and Nan actually had the VCR with the remote control on a on a lead, but it wasn't long enough for where I was lying in bed. So I had to scramble and do much like you do with your phone in the middle of the night when it's in your bed and you can't find it. I had to do that before that bit, and I never managed to, and then I couldn't sleep because it was just so horrifying, that scene.
Frank Langella, one of the best all-time performances. But we are talking about Back to the Future Part 2. The reason I picked this one is not because it was the darkest, but because this was my first exposure to time travel in movies.
Wow.
And I loved it for two reasons. The number two reason is because it broke my poor mother's brain. My mum has a real issue with time travel. She can't follow it. For whatever reason, it's just a block. And it's gotten to the point where if anything time travel happens, mum taps out.
Right.
Best example being in The Matrix, when Morpheus says to Neo, you think it's 1999, but it's actually closer to 2199. My mum stood up and went, good night, everybody, walked out, went to bed. She could not, coronal dissonance, she can't handle it. She can't watch this film, and I loved it for that reason, because it was the one that I understood that my parents didn't. And you know how that makes you feel special.
It's great. Yeah.
I get this. This is the other reason I love it from a time travel perspective, is because I remember Starlog magazine. You remember Starlog magazine?
Yeah.
They actually did an entire article about how the evil 1985 reality worked, with Doc's blackboard drawing and everything. I remember poring over that and going, I understand quantum physics. It's just a movie, but it was so special to me because I got it and no one else did. It made me feel like I was in a special little elite club.
I think I also didn't like, because it's Michael J. Fox in that evil reality. I didn't like, when you see like the good guy go to like basically Donald Trump.
Yes.
Let's just call it what it is. And it's just like, I think that really rocked my world in not a great way. I mean, now it's fine, but like, it really sort of like all that stuff that you held true from the first film, we're just gonna like make it dark, and it's like, wasn't my favorite, but now it is.
What a performance by Michael J. Fox all the way through. I mean, not only as Marty, but as all the different variants of his family too.
If you ever want to see, like, he's one of the best performers, I reckon, in our lifetime, and doesn't get the props for it. So
hands down.
At the moment on the Red streaming service, there is a film that come up in the front screen a few weeks ago called See You Tomorrow.
Okay.
And I was like, I might check that out. And so I started watching it. It's a bunch of urban kids that basically start to time travel. Their teacher, played by Michael J. Fox, at which point they go to him and say, listen, this is what we're thinking will work. And he goes, well, some of the science works out, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, but this is time travel you're talking about. It's not real. At which point I turned it off because the kids leave the classroom, and he goes, time travel, great Scott. And I was like, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not watching this film.
Let him have his little nod back.
No. It could never live up to the nod back from 1,000 Ways to Die in the West. Have you seen that movie?
No, I have not.
There's a bit where it's like set in a small country town, like it's a cowboy movie with Seth MacFarlane. And there's a bit where he's running through the town and he goes into a barn, and it's actually Doc Emmett Brown's barn, and he's working. It's full. They've recreated, and they've even got,
and everything,
and they've got Christopher Lloyd to play the character, and it's just beautiful because it doesn't belong in that film at all, because it's like much like the format of Family Guy. It's all just throwaway jokes cut into a film, but that was the best part of the whole film.
How amazing is it in Back to the Future 2 when you see them go back through the events of Back to the Future 1?
I had never seen that done on film.
Nor had
and
I.
No.
That is maybe what, spoiler alert, I guess, that's what I appreciated most about the most recent Avengers movie.
Yes.
Because they really go down that path to a degree.
After,
And it's just-
taking a dump all over Back to the Future Part 2.
Pretty
Poor
much.
Rhodey.
Oh, man, it is... It's probably one of the greatest second films in a trilogy ever.
Yeah, and that's not, sadly, that's not a common thing.
No. Can I go back into asking about your work?
Absolutely.
How do you, like, because obviously you see some pretty horrid things and hear about some horrid things, like, does it ever get to the point, like, so how do you unwind at home? Like, is it through movies? Is it through, like, obviously toy collecting and wrestling is also good as well, but, like, what gets your mind off of
How do you
things?
reprogram at the end of a bad week?
Yeah. Dame Roma Mitchell, who was a governor of South Australia,
Yeah.
a very famous judge, said that it's like bath water. You pull the plug out at the end of the day, let all the water out. There's a soap scum ring there. You work on scrubbing that out as best you can, then you
Right.
fill the bath up again the next day. So you try to do that. I try to flush it through my writing as well. I try to leave everything on the page. Athletes leave it all on the field or in the ring. I tried to leave it all on the page. But that doesn't always work. I'm not shy about the fact that I've developed a mental illness as a result of my job.
Okay.
I have what's called vicarious trauma,
Right.
which is if you imagine that someone's throwing the mud at the fan, the person that's standing just to the side of the fan cops it as well. That's me.
Right.
Nothing traumatic has actually happened to me, but I've seen so much trauma around me and dealt with so many people who are suffering trauma that you get the splashback.
So it's almost like an over-empathy.
And over-empathy, yeah. I've actually been told by mental health experts that I need to switch off my empathy for others sometimes and practice a little bit of self-empathy because I tend to put others first in this journalistic mindset.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm a good person, just when I'm at work, it's like all senses are to output rather than to input. And so it's comic books, it's video games, it's toys, it's family, it's friends. But that doesn't always work, and that's when it's time to turn to a mental health professional, get some help, someone like that. And I've got no shame in saying that that's necessary.
Oh, no.
There was a case that actually quite literally broke my brain,
Yep.
and I had to rebuild, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of making sure you acknowledge it and doing something about it. So, yeah, 99.9% of the time, it's sit down and watch one of these movies, watch a cartoon, play Kingdom Hearts on the video game system, something like that. But, yeah, there are those times where it just gets beyond my ability to deal.
And if anyone listening is suffering any issues, be sure to hit up the likes of Lifeline or Beyond Blue and Headspace. Anyone, there's always someone there willing to listen. So Google any of those and just be sure to look after yourself.
Do you, and you obviously, like, the younger ones coming through, like, you're sort of promoting self-care and all that sort of stuff. Do you think they have any idea what they're in for?
I try to make them aware as much as I can. I teach court reporting within the Tizer. I recently did a lecture series at the University of South Australia for the journalism students there.
Yeah.
I speak at victims awareness symposiums and homicide victims conferences and things like that, forensics conferences, and that's something that I emphasise now because it was something that I was always aware of, knowing that sort of like you talk about how many injuries you can take on a football field before you can't perform anymore. Similar sort of thing with court reporting. How many times can I hear this awful stuff before I can't hear it anymore?
Yeah.
And so you try to teach people that, you try to make people aware, but you can't really prepare for it. The story I tell is I've had some of the biggest, toughest, nastiest, hardest journos in South Australian history come down to courts with me to help out because I'm missing a person, I need a case covered.
Yeah.
And they'll come back and say, I can never do that again.
Yeah.
I just can't. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine because it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
Some people are wired to do this job. Doesn't make us tougher or better than anybody else. It's just that our skill set lies along that path. Other people's skill set lies along a different path. And it's about knowing when to hit that eject button.
Yeah, it's like when I've talked to first responders and stuff like that, it's just like, you just like, and they to a point they probably can't really understand how you can't not, but like, because they do it all the time and they're wired for that, and it's just like hats off to people who can do that, and hats off to you.
Thank you
for bringing that. Do you ever get to the point? Sorry, I'm just going to keep.
Go for it.
So you talk about how like you're giving the voice to the voiceless sort of thing. At some points, though, we said off air, like it does cross over to the part where the perpetrators are also know who you are, and there's also problems like it can affect your personal life in that way too, like through threats and lots of stuff. Like, was there a point where, right near the start or even any time, where you just like go, look, I might just pack it in?
I've never thought about fully packing it in. Oh no, that's not true. No, I was in Canada in 2005 on holiday, and I was sitting up the top of the mountains in Whistler.
Okay.
And I looked around and I went, why am I putting myself through all this? I could be, looking at this beauty and doing this sort of stuff. Yeah, when I get back to Australia, I'm going to pack it in. I got back and I picked up a case straight away, and there was a family that had absolutely no justice whatsoever.
Right.
There were suppression orders put down on their case, which meant they couldn't even talk about it, and they'd been denied not only justice in terms of within the court system, but just natural justice, the ability to go, this is what I'm going through, this is how my daughter died, this is what we're experiencing right now. Helping them fight through that reawakened it in me. It's like, no, there's a point.
Yeah.
I need to be doing this. There's a great line. One of my other favourite movies, which isn't in this list, is the Veronica Mars movie.
Yeah.
And there's a great line at the end of that where Veronica...
Why don't you two have a sleep?
And there's a great
singing my tune, man.
There's a great line at the end of that film where Veronica says, this is where I belong in the fight.
Yeah.
And I understand that mentality. Like, if you've got the ability to do it, and you can do it without harming yourself, why aren't you doing it?
Right.
And if you don't do it, you're doing a disservice to people.
Excellent. Noble.
Awesome. We might move on to the next choices, and we'll all do a lap around the studio to lighten up, and we'll play a game of Chasey. This is DVD.
Not it.
It is 100.5 WOW FM, Dave's Video Graveyard, joined by Sean Fewster, taking us through his 10 favourite films of all time, and he's going all the way back to the ancient year that was 2018 for his next choice. Sean, what did you pick?
It's the remake of the big hit. No.
Oh, man.
Well, Pain and Gain.
Oh, no. No, we're talking one of the coolest blockbusters ever made, one of the most important blockbusters ever made, one of the most genre-changing blockbusters ever made, and that is the Black Panther. One of my favourite Marvel characters of all time. I don't know how a white kid from Gawler gets into the Black Panther. Simple fact is it happened.
Yeah.
And the way some people talk about Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth and stuff, and they get all emotional when they go to New Zealand and see the Peter Jackson set and stuff like that, Wakanda was that for me. When the Talon fighter breaks through the holocloak and you see Wakanda for the first time, I was a mess in the cinema, because that was a world that I had imagined for so long. And there it was in living, breathing colour. Better than I could have ever imagined it, because the people that made the film were African descent, were African Americans, brought in Afrofuturism and all sorts of concepts that I didn't understand, didn't even know existed, and have now gone and researched and learned about and gone, this is even cooler again than I imagined it would be.
Yeah. No, it was they had so much respect behind it, like, and I'm doing sort of things. So, yeah, I love this film so much.
My major takeaway from this film, beyond all the social, the social influence, I guess you'd say, and how important it was of a film, I was like, let's put Michael B. Jordan in everything. It's a new law. We're having him in every film.
Apparently, the new Superman.
Bring it on.
Look, he was amazing in this. Like, taking nothing away from Chadwick Boseman at all, but the way that he played N'Jaka, Killmonger, just phenomenal. Like, here's a character that came about in the 1970s and was the most sort of stereotypical African villain you could possibly have. Like, he's running around in leopard print pants in the comics with a spiked belt. He had a pet leopard. He had jerry curls. He was every inch a white writer's idea of what a black supervillain looked like. And when they said the two characters we're going to have in this are going to be N'Jaka and M'Baku, who is called the Man-Ape in the comics, and runs around in a gorilla suit.
Oh my God.
And they're like, we're going to put them in the films. I'm like, good luck, Kevin Feige. May God be with you. And yet they nailed it, because Jordan as a performer is phenomenal. And Winston Duke as M'Baku, what a revelation. What a role. That sequence where they go to him in the throne room, I'll feed you to my children. Amazing.
I did a little bit off track, but I did recently see a thing where a guy had a blog where he rated the entire MCU on how many trains are in the films, and it was the most comprehensive thing that was the biggest waste of time. And his favourite films were obviously this, and I think there was Thor, right? Like, and he had a little comment for each. He's like, Thor: The Dark World, terrible movie. Thor rides the train. 10 out of 10. Man, this film was amazing, and
I love this film. One of my worst cinema experiences ever. But I had two guys next to me who had, I shit you not, 2 family-sized pizzas from I don't know where, and they just ate the entire film like really noisily, and like this, I don't know what they had in this pizza, but it stank so bad. I couldn't. There was, we couldn't. It wasn't like a packed theater, but it would be very noticeable if we moved. And I was just like, it was just the weirdest thing. It was like, and they ate it all. They weren't big dudes. They ate a family pizza each.
As I've said to you, my worst cinema experience is, funnily, will tie to the next movie in a certain way. The second Transformers movie, the Josh Duhamel / Shia LaBeouf style one. Yeah. A guy ate a hot Coles chicken in the cinema.
Oh no!
With his hands.
No!
And I couldn't maintain 10 seconds at a time on the screen because I was fascinated with this subhuman eating a Coles chicken with his hands in the cinema. And do you know, I've said this before, cooked chicken, it doesn't matter how nicely prepared it is, there is such a thin line between dirty nappy and fried chicken smell. Where you're like, is that the best smell ever, or is it the worst smell ever? And when it's someone else eating it with just their hands, it's the worst smell ever.
Look, there is only one time that a rotisserie chicken should be eaten barehanded, and that's when it's a bet between Jonah Rock and Brian Cage backstage at a World Series wrestling show, and we're officiating who eats it the fastest. That's the only time that chicken should be eaten with hands like that.
And who got it fastest?
I don't remember. I just remember all of us turning away in horror at several points.
Did they then go wrestle afterwards with like
this was at the end of the show.
Greasy chicken hands. Let's take this to a new level.
No.
This is during setup. I'm ready to wrestle. You have picked a film from 1986. It is an anime. It's a cartoon. You've picked a cartoon.
Yes.
You've picked the world's most devastating cartoon.
The cartoon that destroyed 1,000 lives.
The cartoon that turned me away from this franchise at the time, and I didn't go back to the movies. I was that guy.
You're one of those.
This was an Artax in the Swamp movie for me.
Don't mention that swamp.
We're talking about 1986's Transformers the movie.
Now, interestingly for me, this was the film that made Transformers my number one pop culture thing. Up to 86, I was into Transformers, I was into Masters of the Universe, I was into whatever else was around at the time, Black Star, G.I. Joe, things like that. The fact that the film... So I'm 7 years old when this came out. The fact that the film had the guts to kill off Optimus Prime, to make it a momentous thing, not just a throwaway.
Gave it weight. And then to say effectively, life has to go on, you have to find a way through, you have to become something else, was incredibly powerful to me. I couldn't articulate it that way. It's only recently, Bob Chipman did a fantastic video on YouTube called Really That Good, which is about why Transformers, despite being a 90-minute toy commercial, is actually a good film. I highly recommend it to anybody to watch. It's brilliant the way that he does it. But he said, it's a film about losing your father figure and moving on regardless because you have to. And many, many, many years later, I met Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, who is one of the most incredibly wonderful human beings you could ever hope to meet. You go to meet your heroes, you worry about it, they might be, horrible people. Peter's perfect. Lovely man, proud to say that we're friends. And I said to him, because he's always upset at the fact that they killed him off in this. He's like, I remember reading the script and going, I just bought a new car. Oh no. I said to him, my paycheck.
I don't think Transformers would have lasted if this film hadn't happened.
It definitely set it apart from G.I. Joe. Because G.I. Joe, much like it's parodied in the Community episode.
Great episode.
There was no stakes. There was no death. There was no progression. This committed the, not ultimate sin, but it committed as much as it could. It's the equivalent of killing He-Man in Masters of the Universe.
It is, and it's something that only this franchise has. And what's fascinating is Hasbro, the owners of the franchise, won't go near that anymore. If Optimus dies, he's back within the next reel. It's a
different
temporary
colour to
death.
sell another
different
toy.
Colour to sell another toy, exactly. But this was meant to be it. They had no idea what they'd created. They had no idea that they'd created the first lawfully good, pure hero since Superman to really capture the public's imagination the way that it had. And that's down to Peter's performance as much as anything else. And they didn't realise it. Now they know they can do it as a marketing tool, but they'll never, ever do anything like this ever again because he's now an icon. Arguably, this is what made him an icon. And on top of that, the film is brilliant. It's fast-paced, it's funny, it's action-packed, it's got a killer soundtrack. Amazing soundtrack.
Stan Bush's best work.
Stan Bush's only work.
That is the song that Marky Mark sings as Dirk Diggler in
Boogie Nights.
In Boogie Nights. And I remember when I first saw Boogie Nights, I'm like, it's a Transformers song. But I shouldn't be thinking about Transformers when I'm watching Boogie Nights.
Well, why wouldn't you? Anyway, it's a great film, and I just love sitting down and watching it. It's an instant watch for me. What do I feel like? Transformers the movie, I can probably quote it now. I've seen it so many times.
Awesome. We might get back into the music now, and I think this is a good choice. This is DVG. It is 100.5 WOWFM. There we have from Stan Bush with The Touch. What a lovely song.
Originally written for Sly Stallone's film Cobra.
Yeah,
Really?
I could imagine Cobretti. I'd love to see him in the music video. I want it to be a tie-in. That would have been the best.
It'd be like the music video for True Survivor from Kung Fury.
Yes,
It'd have that kind of
100%.
feel.
It'd be fantastic. You've chosen two films. We're going to let it get away as one decision. You have evenly picked both ends of the Holy Trilogy, Star Wars and The Return of the Jedi.
That's right. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in as to which of these two films is my favourite Star Wars film. Depending on what kind of day I've had, what kind of week I've had, I may want to watch Star Wars, I may want to watch Jedi. These were the two that, as a kid, really spoke to me. I was a Luke Skywalker guy, always. Han was cool, but it was all about Luke for me. I didn't understand the Han Solo love. He was the B player. I got why he was there, but he wasn't the hero. Let's talk about the hero here, folks. I remember watching Star Wars when it first transmitted on Channel 10 for the first time on television.
Nice.
And John Martin's had the toy commercials stitched all the way through it with a guy that I thought was Anthony Daniels as C-3PO spruiking the toys. I've since found that out on YouTube. It wasn't Anthony Daniels. In my mind it was. What can you say about these films that haven't been said? Like, I remember standing on a pile of dirt in Two Wells at my grandparents' farm pretending I was on Tatooine. I remember running around with...
Why haven't we got two moons?
running around with a cardboard toilet roll pretending it was a lightsaber, collecting the Star Wars micro collection figures from Kenner. These films...
Let's talk Jedi.
Let's talk
we
Jedi?
we don't talk Jedi nearly enough.
No.
So let's focus on
Happy
Jedi.
to talk Jedi.
Was my sister's favourite because she liked the Ewoks. And I liked them.
Ewoks get a bad rap. Man-eating teddy bears. Okay? That's scary.
Look, I got nothing but respect for the Ewoks. And the end of that movie, when like the yub, like I always still get tingles now. It's like it's good. Like
Now there's two. I was reading recently. There's two schools of thought, and I've never really thought about it until recently. Do you think there's decapitated heads in those stormtrooper helmets?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I think.
100%.
I reckon they're drinking the blood.
They're like, well, there's our meat. Because clearly they're going to eat the heroes until
right.
C-3PO pretends to be a god.
Yeah.
That's right.
Look, because Jedi is very fun to watch. I get this feeling sometimes that Hamill and Ford in particular were a bit weary of it. Well, especially Ford. I think Ford actually wanted to die in it and they wouldn't let him. But yeah, it's still funny and it's still like we just don't get to talk about it much. Like why is it important to you for Jedi?
I love not the final scene, but the final fight between Luke and Vader. When Luke is absolutely losing it at Vader. Vader says, if you won't turn, perhaps your sister will. And Luke just goes full dark side at him, knocks him all the way down onto his haunches and lops off his hand.
Yeah.
Watching that for the first time, I still remember that moment of dawning horror in my own mind as Luke looked at his own right hand and realised he was literally turning into the thing he hated the most.
Yeah.
He was literally becoming Vader. That was so clever. I just sat there as... I was probably 10 when I saw Jedi for the first time, just going, that is incredible. And as a storytelling moment and as a moral moment, that stuck with me so strongly. And then throwing away the weapon in the face of the Emperor. No, I know you're about to kill me, and that's fine. I would rather die with my principles than turn away from them. That was so powerful. And Hamill just delivered it not hammy, just understated, just weary and no, I'm done. Whatever happens from here is the will of the Force.
Yeah.
And then Vader saving him. That supreme act of self-sacrifice.
Because I used to listen to it in the video store. We used to have it on quite a lot, and I can never pick. There's a time like this, like because he's got that really laboured breathing at the time. Like but Vader's like really like, and there's he's looking back and forth. I'm like, he lets Luke have it before he picks up the Emperor. He could have picked that Emperor up like about 2 minutes before then, but he's like,
I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Yeah. But when he picks him up like that, there's a lift in the music that is so like John Williams. Just, I mean, yeah, he's obviously a master, but like that lift in music, I could not see what's on the screen, but I know what's going on the screen, and it's amazing. I love it.
It's amazing to think that all those Star Wars films can be conveyed by the music. You put on the sound. We used to have the big LPs of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
You put them on, and you just close your eyes, and you see everything happen.
Yeah.
So good.
Do you like the new trilogy?
I really, really enjoyed Force Awakens a lot. I enjoyed Last Jedi until Camino. No, not Camino. What's the casino planet?
Oh, there.
Yeah, Casino Planet. I went, no, not liking this bit. Enjoyed it again. Then Luke died, and I had my entitled white boy fan reaction of, no, rage flip the table, hate it.
Take Sonic's teeth out.
Exactly, completely despise it. Took me 10 minutes to get back in the game and go, no, that all makes sense. I'm fine with it. I'm good. We went back and saw it a second time, and I enjoyed it. It's not my favourite, but I don't have a problem with it the way a lot of people do. I think it's a good film.
That casino scene...
Apart from the casino scene.
No, but that... I'll watch it to set up that scene at the end when there's a boy with the broom at the end.
Yep.
And he raises up, like...
That's cool, but the casino thing is still too long.
I've openly cried to that scene.
That's a cool scene, but the casino sequence is still too long and overstuffed.
Yeah.
My wife was quite concerned watching Last Jedi with me because I actually leant forward excitedly in my seat. The guards versus Kylo and Rey.
So
that
good.
I was quite reserved.
That slow motion bit in it though irks me. I don't know why. I'm just like, just do it
because it's not Star Warsy, perhaps.
That was the only bit that sort of took me out of it. Like, there's never been a slow motion really bit in Star Wars before.
What if someone re-edits it for you and puts a wipe transition? That's better.
Coming from the horizontal. I want a horizontal.
Look, I love Rey, I love Finn, I love Poe, I love all of those characters. I'm not a fan of the prequels at all. I really don't like the Clone Wars cartoon. I really do like Rebels. I love Rebels, but I'm a Ralph McQuarrie fan, so to finally see Ralph McQuarrie's designs up on screen, legit, drives me batty in the best possible
Caravan
way.
of Courage.
I like Caravan of Courage. I remember liking
Wilfred Brimley.
Yes. Hey, I even have the Christmas special on VHS.
Yeah.
The first
I
appearance of Boba
cannot
Fett.
get through the Wookiee bit. I've tried, and even of my childhood love of Star Wars will not get me through.
You have a VHS copy of Harrison Ford dying on site.
Yes. And Carrie Fisher coked out of her mind.
Oh, man. She doesn't even know where she is.
But yeah, I do like the new stuff a lot, and I'm really looking forward to Rise of Skywalker and seeing what it's all about.
Yes.
Awesome. We will continue with a little bit of music here on DVG. It is 100.5 WOW FM Guest Choice Special here on this wonderful Monday night. Currently 9:30 down here in beautiful Semaphore. Now, we are continuing through the list of Sean Fewster's 10 favourite films. We're up to number 3 in his choices. Now, you have picked a very stylistic film from the 90s. I'll give everyone a clue. It's a film where Ernie Hudson plays a policeman. Oh, wait, that's everything Ernie Hudson's been in that's not Ghostbusters. Tell us your next choice.
My choice is The Crow, starring Brandon Lee.
Nice.
I love this film. I always have. I remember going to see it and being blown away by the stylistic choices, by the way it was done, and by Brandon Lee himself. Brandon Lee was one of my favourite actors, and his death was shattering for me. You all have that first celebrity death experience of somebody you really admire. And I remember kids at school telling me Brandon Lee had died, and I didn't believe them. I thought they were playing a practical joke on me because they just, they knew how much I loved him. And to see the film finished was great, and then for it to be what it was, it's a horrible kind of beauty.
Yes.
It's like jagged, broken glass. It's beautiful to look at, but it cuts you if you look at it too hard or too close. It's an awful film in so many ways, and it speaks very truthfully, I think, to the horror of crime and of being made a victim and of having your agency and your rights taken away from you, especially as a woman, especially as a young child. It is an unflinching look.
It's
at
harrowing.
That. It is harrowing.
Yeah,
it is a harrowing film. And at the same time, it's an ultimately hopeful film because it talks about, literally, it can't rain all the time. There has to be a better day coming, but somebody's got to have the strength to actually take that step and make it happen.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, and interestingly, not the undead avenger from beyond the grave, but the little girl and the mother and the cop and the real world people have to be the ones that actually action that change and take it forward, because undead Spectre or not, he can't actually do it alone. That's the message of the film.
And like on our podcast, we have covered 3 Michael Wincott films, and it has really developed. It has really showed us how he is one of the greatest character actor villains in the history
so
of film.
good.
Like, and he is never the first thing you think of when you think of The Crow. He's never the first thing you think of when you think of Robin Hood. And we recently, I don't know why, we visited
the cousin.
We recently visited Metro with Eddie Murphy.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, here is this stellar actor playing the greatest villain ever, and here is Eddie Murphy phoning it in.
We say, like, Michael Wincott's performance in that film could have been in Heat.
Yeah.
Like, it's that good. Like, he is that good as that actor.
Don't forget him in Three Musketeers as well.
Yeah.
Next to
Great,
Tim
yeah.
Curry.
Yeah.
I mean, he shared the screen with Tim Curry and didn't get devoured along with the scenery.
He held his own with Rickman, like we said in
Exactly.
Robin Hood.
Yeah. And he was actually so badly affected by Brandon's death that he took a sabbatical from acting after The Crow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Wincott actually stepped down for a while because he just couldn't handle it after that on-set death.
We also always, when we cover this film, like, the soundtrack for this film was very landmark because it was one, like, alternative music with a film, and, like, the soundtrack was probably nearly as popular as the film itself.
It was authentic.
It was.
It's not your tie-in soundtrack. It's not the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack where it's just like, give us something current and heavy, and that became the soundtrack. This was important. This was the score put to, like, basically alternative music.
It was gritty. It was like, you know, and fit in with the movie really well. And yeah, I just remember loving it. That's you know, Stone Hill Pilots was on that. I was like a big fan at the time. I was like, oh my god, they're in the movie.
9 Inch Nails, Dead Souls playing over the rooftop sequence. And like you say, Dave, it is the score for the film because there's very little orchestral work.
Yeah.
And when you think of the origins of this whole story being from that Detroit punk rock scene, the Iggy Pop, things like that, with James O'Barr, the original creator, writing it to that Detroit metal, Detroit pop punk sound, it makes sense that it should be a rock and roll music film that way, and tell the story that way. Because, of course, James O'Barr created this concept to get over the death of his fiancée in a car crash, and then the tragedy of losing Brandon in the making of it.
Yeah. Well,
It's probably really good that all the attempts at remaking it have not gotten off the ground for more than one reason. Some films don't need to be remade, and maybe this one's best left alone.
What's the go with Jason Momoa's The Crow? That's not happening now?
I don't even heard that.
Scuppered as far as I know.
Yeah. I don't think it needs to be done. I think it's definitive, and but then again, like, I don't think we need any more Batmans, and that's happening.
I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we've had a super Batmans.
Much like the article we shared last week about when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman and all the fan backlash.
Yeah.
I actually read another article today that was the reactions to Heath Ledger becoming the Joker.
Oh man, I remember
thought,
that.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Look, I'm going to go on record now and say I think Patterson's going to knock it out of the park.
Oh, yeah.
I don't need to see another Batman film, but if they make him a detective for the first time in cinema, I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hint, guys, look to the Telltale Batman games. That's what you want to make.
I reckon, and because that's what I was like so disappointed when Gotham came along, because like one of my favorite comic book runs was GCPD, and like some of those stories, it's about the cops working with like Batman, who most of them hate, and then like, but then also they got these the freaks, like ones called like the Freak Beat, like they have to deal with the Joker and stuff, and it's like it's a very human Gotham element, and then they didn't capture it in the TV series, but I would love to see a Gotham TV show, a movie with Batman as like the background.
Yeah,
give me Gordon, give me a Commissioner Gordon film.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Speaking of Batman, the greatest Batman film ever came out this year. Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was perfection in every way. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Still yet to...
I watched some clips today. I was very impressed.
It's great. Speaking of Batman, here's a fantastic song. It is Dave's Video Graveyard, taken from Jimmy C's absolute favourite Batman film. It is Seal with Kiss from a Rose. That soundtrack was fantastic.
It was. It's just a shame that Jimmy C's not.
Oh, a little bit of heat here on the show. Speaking of wrestling, say that you were to step into the squared circle with any wrestler, alive or dead, who would you want to face off against?
Face off against? Oh, now that is a very, very tough question. Huh. Wish you'd given me some warning about that one. I would have put some thought into it. No, you put me right on the spot there. It would be either Ricky the Dragon Steamboat or the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Nice.
I would love to have the ability to have a match with one of those two greats.
So I'm guessing you will be parting with some of your hard-earned money for the upcoming Macho Man Slim Jim action figure?
No, I won't, because I limit myself to the LJNs.
Nice.
If I didn't limit myself to the LJNs, yes, but I did at the most recent Toy Fair buy an original Randy Savage foam finger, oh yeah, from 1991. Dig it.
Guys both suck so much.
You spent the whole break talking about comic books, all right?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with comic books, man.
I'm just saying.
I'm really the point of the triangle between the two of you, aren't I?
Man.
We were just different fat kids, all right? We were just two different fat kids growing up. Nothing wrong with
from
that.
across the schoolyard, like, maybe one day. All right, we got 2 films left on your list, and one is a classic. And
whatever made you pick one of the most famous courtroom dramas in the history of the world?
I can't imagine. No, actually, my love for this film and the book in particular dates back to high school. They give you stuff to read at high school. You read it for 5 minutes, you chuck it away. Something about To Kill a Mockingbird really stuck with me. The style of the narration with Scout and talking about it from her perspective, the honesty of it, and particularly Atticus Finch, the whole idea of you've got to put yourself in another man's shoes and walk a mile in another man's shoes. That really spoke to me a lot. I think it spoke to some of the things I was seeing in my hometown growing up. I think it spoke to some of the social justices that I saw, some of those concepts we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah.
And it's just such an incredible performance by Gregory Peck, and particularly by the child actors. It's just a beautifully executed film. It's a really gentle film about a really ugly topic. And it delivers it with such poise and sophistication and grace. And I think grace is really the word.
Yeah. I mean, for its time, the subject matter, and also just where it was based and who he's defending, it's a leap.
Sadly, even now, the subject material is difficult. You look at some of the things going on in the US right now, some of the cases in things like Making a Murderer and Serial and stuff like that. It's still happening to this day.
Yeah.
And as a race of people, we just haven't learned those lessons. One of the things I often say is the world right now, there's too much E and not enough E.
Yeah.
Too much entitlement, not enough empathy.
Right.
That's what they were facing in To Kill a Mockingbird. That's what we're still facing now.
Yeah. Yeah. The lack of empathy, like, they're teaching it more in schools these days. Like, it's basically empathy-based learning these days, and it's kind of sad that it can't be inert. Like, it's that you have to teach something like that, but like, because they're not getting it, in other places. So it's like, we got like the last line of defense, like, care about other people, please.
Because in the 1980s, greed was good, and we all got this idea that sympathy was wrong. And now we've gotten sympathy mixed up with empathy. Nobody wants to be sued. Nobody wants to be sympathetic. Nobody wants to be weak. So we can't show sympathy. No, we're not asking you to show sympathy. We're asking you to show empathy.
Be a human.
Be a human about it.
Do you find yourself drawn towards courtroom dramas, or is it something that you actively avoid?
I often say, I play the home game. I avoid true crime TV shows. I avoid true crime books. I used to love things like Law and Order and Law and Order SCU, shows like that. I grew up watching Perry Mason, of all things. I've
Remaking
memories of watching Raymond Burr. Remaking?
Yeah.
There you go.
It's looking good.
Okay. Oh. And one of my all-time favourite TV shows is Veronica Mars. I love that show. But these days, I just can't do it. It has to be other stuff. I have to
It's just Murder,
break
She
away.
Wrote for teenage girls.
No. Look, it came out the same time as Lost.
Shut your
It is
mouth.
better than Lost. Lost couldn't even tie up all of its plot lines. Veronica Mars tied up all its plot lines at the end of season 1 and gave you 13 more for season 2. That's a TV show. But no, I've got to move away from crime and true crime stuff when it comes to home time, because otherwise I just get soaked in it,
Yeah, consumes you.
And it's too much like real life, because you'll see something, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember someone who's been in that situation, or I've been to a case like that, or worse. That's not how it works. How are you so stupid? And then you get frustrated in a whole different way.
You watch the likes of Erin Brockovich and you're like, I've used my boobs to get to move the case forward.
Hey, this is a good rap, right?
Yeah, hey, each to its own.
Just one last, fanboy. When did because when working as a court reporter in South Australia, like when I grew up, like we live in a very insulated sort of state where I never knew like half the stuff that was going on. That was like so when someone lent me Youngblood by Bob O'Brien in about 2004 or 5, and I read that in one day. It's the book that details the family murders in SA. It still remains to this day the only book that I've read within a 24-hour span, because I was just like, I know that place.
Apart from City of Evil, of course.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Well, I couldn't put that down.
That's because I glued it to your hands.
Coming out on Crime Investigation Australia. It's like, did it at the start? Like, I remember that sort of just blowing my world. Like, and then like you get on stuff like the Beaumont Children, and then we had like the Bodies in the Barrels and all that stuff, and then you start to realize, which is the crux of the book of City of Evil, is that we have something going on here.
We do.
Do you think how did it hit you when you started sort of realizing that we're not living in this sort of nice, happy?
I don't know whether I ever thought we were living in a nice, happy environment. I suppose, again, that whole dueling influences of cop and bikie in the family sort of showed me different sides of things.
Yep.
And I remember growing up in an era where you were told, don't walk home alone from school, the family will get you.
Yeah.
Don't look at the white van, they might kidnap you and take you away. There was always a sense of threat and menace. I don't know whether that was Northern Suburbs life or whether that was all of South Australian life. But whether that was just being raised by a cop, there was always that feeling of you've got to watch yourself at all times. So when those pieces of information you talk about sort of slotted in to my developing understanding, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
We're not making too much of it here. We really are that screwed up, and we do have to watch ourselves.
Bigger question. Are we getting better? Is it getting better?
No, it's changing.
Do you think... A lot of people think that perhaps society's always been this bad, and it's just more prevalent because of the likes of reporting the way it is, because everything's instant now. Like the global village was a concept when I was in high school, and within 10 years it's like, oh yeah, that's old news, it's legit. Do you think we've always been that terrible and now you just hear more about it, or going up or down, do you think?
We've always been that terrible. You're hearing about it now, not just because of the global village, not just because of the internet, but because we have finally created... Sorry, no, let me start that again. Because we are finally making inroads to creating a culture where victims are believed, where victims can speak out, where there are places that you can go to get help, where women are not treated as property, where kids actually have a voice. All those sorts of things are changing, so the voiceless can speak out and be heard and be listened to, whether they speak out on social media, whether they speak out in a police report, whether they speak out in a protest. So you are hearing... Not more of it, it's just that the cover's been thrown off completely.
Yeah.
That's for what I'll call, for want of a much better term, your traditional crime. The sorts of crime that has always been prevalent in South Australia, we're now getting the spotlight shone on it because there are those avenues. What we're seeing, though, is the nature of South Australian crime change. Ice, drugs like that are making people increasingly violent.
Cheaper than beer in the
cheaper
rural?
than beer, that's right, in the rural areas. Younger people are offending sooner and more violently. Women are offending longer into their lives, and more violently. South Australia is the only place in the country where the female crime rate has increased year on year for 10 years. And the types of crimes that women are committing are going up all the way to and including murder and sexual assault.
Yeah.
Only place that it's happening right here in Adelaide.
What?
Yeah, so the unique makeup of this place is creating a new form of criminal. And it's either extraordinarily young people of both genders or women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, even into their 60s, committing violent offending.
Yeah.
Man, I'm doomsday prepping.
Might not be the worst idea. I mean, the good news is that the rank and file officers of the South Australia Police do a damn good job of keeping it in check.
Yep.
I'm not going to talk about SAPOL, the organisation, because we have our issues. There are individual judges of the courts that do a very good job of keeping that in check. Again, I'm not talking about institutions here. We're talking about individuals. No faith in institutions you're going to find in me. So there is hope, but it's about all of us understanding that we can't ever go back to the way it was. This is the way it always was. You were just blind to it for whatever reason, whether it be an insular life, whether it be because someone was keeping that person down, they didn't have the opportunity to speak out. So rather than stuff up your ears with cotton wool and say, no, I want it to be like the old days, be like Atticus Finch. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes and realise, if I support this person, maybe we can see positive change.
So you have seen a few positive changes in your time of like crime reporting. Like I've read into a lot of things, the likes of what's considered the less dead. That is a concept that's been like noticed, and basically the world's trying to change around it. Yeah. Where a lot of identified groups were considered to be less of a crime when they turned up like dead and stuff. So it's. Are there steps being made, do you think, that are taking us in the right direction, or is it too hard to know?
No, there are steps being made. One of the big ones I can think of is the prevalence of online safety, making sure kids understand what's actually going on out there, that there are predators trying to catch you, that they are pretending to be other people, that it's not necessarily safe to just be open and expressive online. That's a space where there's a lot of education, there's a lot of positive support and reinforcement, encouragement for kids to speak out, to talk, to let people know if something's gone wrong. We need to transfer that kind of mentality onto all forms of sexual offending, all forms of violent offending, all forms of fraud. I mean, the number of old people out there that get defrauded by fake telemarketers, fake communication companies, and are too embarrassed and ashamed to speak out about it. That's the sort of crime that we don't talk enough about because it's underreported, in the same way that tragically sexual assault remains underreported in both male and female victims.
I think online, how to do that sort of stuff should be a life skill taught like mandatorily by councils, or like given like especially for anyone over like 70 or stuff. Because I've heard so many horror stories when they're trying to, they don't know what they're getting into, and it's just it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is. And this is the thing about it. Like I say, it's not that there's an old days to go back to. No. It's that this is always the way the world was. Now that your eyes are open to it, be a human about it, as you said a minute ago.
Yep.
Don't blind yourself to it.
Fantastic.
If I can give you one career bit of advice, don't quote me to prove a point. That will bite you in the ass.
No, I'm comfortable with that one.
Nice. Yes. I'm smart, you see.
I do.
Thinking good much, lots.
Speaking the good words.
Speaking the good words.
Broken Hill are lighting the torches right now.
I just became mayor of Broken Hill while we've been on air. Thank you very much. Your final film for this evening is, speaking of overly violent...
And picking up on the themes we were just talking about.
Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. And being scared of Hugo Weaving. V is off. I'm doing it.
V for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta. I loved the V for Vendetta graphic novel growing up.
Yeah.
My mum still refers to it to this day as that effing comic, because I was 5 years old when my parents let me read V for Vendetta.
Oh, my Lord.
Now, if you want any explanation for my psyche, my political views, my beliefs, pretty sure you can zero in on that moment. You can pretty much nail it on that. And that's why this is my number one film, because for me, this is that rare film that takes the source material, distills it, funnels it, sharpens it, and makes a poignant point with it. Because the original graphic novel of V for Vendetta was about the British experience of Thatcherism.
Yep.
It's a very well done graphic novel by Alan Moore and by Dave Lloyd. And it was Alan Moore's project before he did Watchmen. So a lot of the narrative devices that you see in Watchmen, playing with time, playing with perspective and stuff, is present in the V for Vendetta comic. Doesn't really belong there, though.
Okay.
It's a simple story told in a complicated way. When the Wachowski sisters and their crew got hold of V for Vendetta and turned it into the film, they sharpened it down to what it was about and aimed it directly at modern concerns. That, for me, is a good adaptation. Rather than trying to say, we're going to tell a story in 2009 about Thatcherism in the 80s. No, we're going to take the same point and make it about what you're dealing with right now. And to me, this is probably my favourite film.
Yep.
Yeah, my favourite film. I would say that even after everything else we've talked about, if I nail my colours to the mast, it's V for Vendetta, because this film sums up how I feel about so many things, how I react to so many things, and the two of the most important concepts in my life. People shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And ideas are bulletproof.
And it's not often you see someone wear a Guy Fawkes mask that's not overweight. So it's good element in this film. No, it really, you've nailed the gist of the whole film. And yeah, I'm really surprised. It's the first time of our 2-year run that someone has picked this film.
I remember seeing, because like it's always up there. Like if it was on, like I'd be watching it. It's just because I hadn't read. I was one of those ones that watched it without reading it. I went back and read it, and I agree with you. I prefer the film version. Natalie Portman deserved all the awards for this movie.
Amazing. The sequence where she goes through the torture camp experience.
Oh my god, yeah.
So watching that in the cinema, I was the only person in the cinema that knew where that was going.
Yeah, all right, okay.
And so you know how you can pick an actor's voice if you know what you're listening for? That is Hugo Weaving's voice throughout that sequence. Just doing
Megatron's voice.
Yeah, Megatron's voice, doing the many different accents that Elrond of the Forest does.
Yep.
Agent Elrond, Megatron Smith. And
Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Priscilla, Queen of the V. And it is Hugo Weaving playing all those other characters in that sequence, and I knew where it was going. The shock that registered with the rest of that cinema audience when he was revealed to have been doing it all, I'm like, that's perfect. They nailed it, because that's how I felt as a kid reading that moment.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Awesome. Now,
Stephen Fry dies, and I don't really like that.
Oh, look, Stephen Fry's role in that is so pivotal.
Yeah.
And it just brings so much heart and, again, empathy to the film. To see so many people going through this experience from so many different walks of life. And you look at the UK right now, and I honestly refer to the UK right now as the world's largest V for Vendetta theme park. Because that's what it's turning into. I've got so many friends that live over there, and I just say to them, look, cancel your tickets to the V for Vendetta theme park and come home. It's not great here, but it's not like that.
No. Thank you so much for joining us. We've pretty much run out of time, but given that you have infinity projects up in the air at the moment, why don't you give us a quick rundown of what's coming up for you?
Yeah, well, of course, I'll still be working at the Advertiser every day, covering courts. And
just quickly with the Advertiser, do you ever read the online comments?
Well, I don't get online comments on my stories.
In general, the Advertiser's online comments?
Yeah, no, not often.
Makes me feel like a genius.
So you can catch all of my journalism on advertiser.com.au. That's also copied across to my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Sean Fewster. To keep up with Riot City Wrestling, check out my Twitter at Sean Fewster, and toy collecting and things is at Sean_Fewster on Instagram. We've got RCW Live this coming Saturday night at the Riot City Wrestling Academy. Details on riotcitywrestling.com. And then in 2 weeks' time after that, we have our next show at HQ in the city, which is, of course, Hail to the King.
Our boy Zach's getting his belt back, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, let's see that happen. And then not long after that will be World Series Wrestling's Zero Fear Tour with Pentagon Jr. and Ray Phoenix making their Australian debuts. Sadly, that won't be here.
Pretty much the two best flippy wrestlers, Paul.
Oh,
Bandito. I'll mansplain it to you. The two best flippy wrestlers.
Flippy wrestlers, okay, cool.
I challenge you with that with Bandito and Flamita, but that's another night.
Yeah.
Those matches will be happening 2 nights in Melbourne, 1 night in Sydney, but the whole thing will, of course, later be available on DVD and also on World Series Wrestling's. I think we usually promote them through the Fight Network.
Yep.
And awesome. I think that's it for now.
And Foxtel.
Foxtel, that's right. City of Evil's been picked up by Foxtel's Crime Investigation Australia. Far as I know, that's on Monday nights and also available streaming on the Foxtel Go app.
Excellent.
Awesome. Next book, if you ever need a blurb for the front cover, I'll say whatever you want. And I'll become the supreme emperor of Broken Hill.
Don't put your picture next to it.
Good words lots with my face and thumbs up.
Ginger Mac says this.
Guys, thank you so much for having me tonight. This has been excellent.
Dude,
No problem. Thank you so much for coming.
You're always welcome back.
Thanks, man.